and welcome back to the 8th video in our series. So in the last video, we covered how to increase our pool of available objects by modifying the query of a report. And in this video, we're going to show you how to manipulate the report itself to view those new available objects. So if you remember in the last video when we ran our query, the objects that we added to our query did not end up in the table in the rows and columns of that report. Now the reason for this is because we have to explicitly declare that we want to view those objects in that table. So going to the available objects on the left-hand side here, I'm going to start with entry type code. And to bring an object into a table, you have to click and drag the object into the table itself. Now when dragging an object into a table, it's very important to pay attention to the shaded region when you release that object into the table. So I'm going to show you by dragging entry type code. And the first thing I'm going to show you is when you actually release an object over an already existing column header. So you'll notice that the shaded region is a rectangle covering the majority of the surface area of the column header. When I release this, it's actually going to replace the original column. Now something you may have noticed when you replace the column, there's actually going to be more rows of data than there were previously. So instead of breaking out each individual row of data by port code by number of entries, we're now breaking out each row of data by port code by entry type by number of entries. Remember that dimension objects are the basis of analysis in a report, and then measure objects act dynamically with those dimensions to run calculations on the data in a database. So say that I wanted to bring an object into a table, but I did not want to overwrite the original column that existed in that table. I'm going to go back to port of entry name, which we previously erased. And this time when I drag it in, I'm actually going to release the object in between two of the column headers. So as you can see, port of entry name was inserted between port of entry code and entry type code. Now to adjust the column width, I can click in between two column headers and then drag to adjust it. Or I can just double click like in Excel spreadsheets to automatically adjust the column width for me. Now you're probably wondering, why is it that port of entry name is not breaking out the data into more rows like entry type code did? Well, this is because port of entry code and port of entry name are at what's called the same level of granularity. And don't let that word scare you. All granularity means is the level of detail. There's a one-to-one relationship between a port code and a port name, and there isn't going to be any more data that you can actually spread out onto additional rows by the addition of the port of entry name column. So let's combine these two concepts of granularity and bringing in more columns into a report. Mode of transportation and mode of transportation code, just like port of entry code and port of entry name, are at the same grain. Now if I click one object and then I hold down the control key, I can select additional objects and you'll see that they remain highlighted. Once I do that, I can just click and drag and bring them into the table like the other columns. So now my report, as you can see, is going to give me a number of entries for every port of entry, for every entry type, for every mode of transportation that exists. And that's going to be it for this 8th video. In the next video, we're going to go back into the query panel and look at how to change the query filters.